Welcome to a Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Shout out to the Yuki Kawamura fans out there. He is now on a two-way deal, sticking around in Memphis for the long term. We'll talk about that, plus the good and the bad of the Grizzlies preseason heading into the regular season getting started. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's a Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much for being with us. Again, it's always nice when able to say with us. It is I, Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole. He, of course, is the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Memphis Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis. I am Joe Mullinax. I'm a contributor for Grizzly this season, and I, of course, am your co-host for Locked On Grizzlies, and always happy to be with you each and every time an episode drops. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, wherever you get podcasts. Make sure you're checking us out, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Today's a big day for us, partner. It's the official soft launch of our newsletter that we're doing, Locked On Grizzlies newsletter. You can go to lockedondaily.com, find our newsletter there, subscribe. Today will be the first run of that. We'll start advertising it more in the week ahead as we get the new technology underway. But you can have Locked On Grizzlies sent to your mailbox each and every day. Very exciting times as we continue to grow and expand the Locked On Podcast Network. More ways to be an everydayer than ever before, Damichael Cole. How are you doing, sir? Hopefully you enjoyed your last calm weekend for about 6 months.
It's about to really pick up. Big travel week ahead of us and everything. But yeah, I'm excited for a lot of the new things that we're adding to Locked On Grizzlies as well. Shout out to the everydayers. Shout out to the people who've been tuning in with us as well. And Joe, there have been a lot of fans kind of coming up to me at the games and things, saying they're enjoying the show. And
great.
I want to make sure you're a part of that too. So shout out to the everydayers.
Shout out to the everydayers. And again, www.lockedondaily.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter. It's a busy time of year for Damichael and I, so I will ask that you be a little bit patient with us as we get that fully locked and loaded. But it's going to include a local team-centric story from myself more often than not. Damichael will write every once in a while, but obviously he's very busy writing for the Commercial Appeal, so it'll usually be me. We're also going to have Katie Heidel, who is a phenomenal writer from Basketball Feelings, and she does so much other great work. She is now writing for us, doing national stories with Locked On. We're going to have an X&O deep dive every Thursday from Mike Shearer. We're going to have fantasy basketball tips on this newsletter. So it's going to be Grizzly-centric with some national twists. The Locked On newsletter. We're very excited about it. Again, lockedondaily.com. Subscribe to the newsletter. Maybe in this opening round of the newsletter, we should talk about our boy Yuki. Damichael, Yuki Kawamura on a two-way deal now. It is official. You had kind of hinted in the Commercial Appeal, partner, that this was probably the direction they were going to go, converting Scottie Pippen Jr. to the full two-way contract. The 5'8" Yuki doing enough in the preseason to show that he belongs. Obviously, a majority of his time will probably be spent down in South Haven with the Memphis Hustle, but it is a fun story, and it's a guy who has kind of become a cult icon. Maybe icon's a little too strong, but a cult hero in Memphis, not just for his size, but the strength of his game, and especially as a facilitator, he seems to fit right in.
Let me tell you why icon might not be too strong. It's simply because of the fact that Japan has not produced a large amount of NBA players from a quantity point of view. Right now, before, we just seen Yuki get the two-way deal. Rui Hachimura was the only active Japanese player in the NBA. Last season, there were two with Yuta Watanabe and Rui Hachimura. But now you have this Yuki Kawamura, who is the first Japanese point guard to make it to the NBA. And, I've done TV interviews with TV stations out in Japan and interviews, with other people, who write about, who cover, Japan. And they talk about Yuki as he is none. He is someone who's kind of carrying the torch in a way of being that next guy who can make the NBA from Japan. But yeah, it's a big deal to his native country, but it's particularly speaking with the Grizzlies and why I think he was the guy. It was simple for me. Again, you mentioned the story that I wrote, and I kind of talked about the idea and on the last episode of Locked On Grizzlies, Yuki Kawamura or Mal Pereira. It was going to be one of those two guys. If you like the big jumbo athletic wing who has shown the ability to shoot the basketball, Mal was your guy, the Brazilian forward. But here's the difference. Mal, he gives you a lot of upside, I think is the best way to put it, as a forward. But Yuki, what he can do in the G League with the developmental system of the Grizzlies could go beyond what Mal would be able to do in the G League. Now, let me kind of wrap around here what I mean by that. And this is a big reason why I personally think Yuki made the roster. Mal would go to the G League, again, on a two-way contract, play some games down there. And I don't think he's really going to help guys like Cam Spencer. If Jalen Wells were to spend some time down there, or Jay Huff, or whoever else, he's not really going to help those guys really elevate their games. Yuki Kawamura is the perfect player to put in that situation, because in the G League, you don't usually see guys with the playmaking ability of a guy like Yuki Kawamura. What's that going to do is he's going to facilitate things and put Grizzlies players. I mean, if you think I'm bluffing right now, you saw the Grizzlies in the preseason. Look how easy Zach Edey and Jay Huff were getting buckets when Yuki Kawamura was in the game as compared to anyone else, was running the show. Not really Ja Morant, because those two guys didn't play with Ja much, but Scottie Pippen Jr., Marcus Smart, when John Conchar was at point guard, and whoever else you can think of. It was different when Yuki Kawamura ran the show. So we'll see how much we see him at the NBA level. And, again, two-way contract, can't be active for more than 50 games and eligible for the playoffs, all of that stuff. But where I think he makes the biggest difference in it is he can be that guy who can really help the development of a Cam Spencer, can help the development of a Jay Huff, as well as his own personal development.
It's an investment in the entire organization. I think you put it really well there, partner. He is going to have a style of play that is going to allow for other guys to shine. And within that shine, Yuki himself will get a little bit of glow up at the same time. Yuki is a 5'8" point guard.
Shortest in the league now. Yeah.
Not the most fleet of foot athlete. He just isn't. And I think that it's okay to point that out. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have value. And I think that he has compensated for his lack of size, his lack of natural ability with his basketball skill set. And in particular, his ability to find those passing lanes really is, it's not just his handle and his ability to pass off the dribble, it's his timing. I've been really impressed with how he understands exactly where he's supposed to fit inside of these schemes and in these drop passes, the way that he finds guys underneath, like that pass to Zach Edey stands out in my mind. He understands the scheme, he executes it well, and that is going to enable guys who maybe have a higher ceiling than him, as you just alluded to reach their full potential. It's kind of like being a gatekeeper in professional wrestling. It's a guy who they keep on the roster because he's a good hand. He knows how to wrestle. He knows those sorts of things. And he helps the other guys get better as they realize their potential. You need people like that in an organization. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be good themselves or that they're not worth what the other guys are in terms of potential, but they are guys that are in a position to enable those others to fully get to those ceilings. And being that kind of a leader in a way for that team down in South Haven is really going to pay dividends, I think.
Yeah, it should. It definitely should. And again, the playmaking is plus. That's his area. That's his niche. That's the reason, despite being 5'8", he has the opportunity that he has right now. And you mentioned, his playmaking ability and the fact that, sometimes he passes the ball, he throws the ball to a spot, and the guy is supposed to be there, or the guy will get there, and he's throwing it before they're there. So high IQ stuff from him. And yeah, there are some limitations. I think we really didn't see much scoring from him throughout some league. He had the game, second to last game of the preseason, he made 3 3-pointers, but there wasn't much scoring there. It was pretty much playmaking offensively, defensively. Of course, there are going to be some limitations, even though I think I said it in one of the shows, the players always talk about, we haven't seen it in the games yet, so I want to see it in the game, but they talk about how there's been a practice before where Yuki Kawamura has kind of led them in offensive rebounding. So he has that, that short guy sneaks up on you, and you think you got an easy rebound, he just comes up under you and gets the ball. Apparently he's got some of that to him, but we haven't seen it much in the game yet. But yeah, he's pesky. He fights. Ja Morant talks about how when they first started practicing, Yuki was picking him up full court. Picking up Ja Morant full court. Like, who do you think you are, right? But he's a competitive dude, and I think he is probably, he was the right person for that two-way spot.
He's not afraid of anything, and that's definitely somebody that you want in that spot, especially given his size. The Napoleon complex might be a little bit strong with him in terms of his height, but he's just another in a long line of dudes that check off the Grizzlies boxes in terms of efficiency, in terms of having a chip on his shoulder. I think he was the right guy for that spot too. Let Damichael and I know if you agree in the comments. Hit us up on X. How are you feeling about Yuki Kawamura now being the two-way contract, replacing Scottie Pippen Jr., who, of course, is on a full contract now with the Memphis Grizzlies? This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by BetterHelp. What's something that scares you? We just talked about how Yuki Kawamura doesn't seem like he's afraid of much, but it's okay to be afraid of things. For me, I've mentioned in the past, it's bees. My son and I were out at an event over this past weekend, and there was a bee flying around him, and I picked him up like a tidal wave was coming, and I ran away from a basic bee, right? I want to stress, it was a normal freaking bee, and my wife looked at me like I was a crazy person. But I am terrified of bees. I don't want my son to get stung, and I don't want me to get stung either. Whether it's bees, whether it's death, or everything in between in terms of fears, therapy is a great tool for facing them and finding ways to overcome them. Because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place, and it holds us back. If you're thinking of starting therapy, you should give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Check them out today. Damichael, preseason is finally behind us, right? It always feels like somehow the NBA preseason, it's not as long as the NFL preseason, but it feels as long at times. It's good to have regular season basketball up on the horizon. Obviously, tomorrow with opening night, the Grizzlies play Wednesday. I know you fly out for Utah tomorrow. We'll talk more about that later in the show. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, right? So it's one of those situations here. We're going to do it. Do you want the good news first or the bad news, right? We're going to start with the bad news first, the bad of preseason. I'm going to lead off with the obvious, and maybe you'll be able to go a little bit more in depth, partner, as you have a tendency to do in a wonderful way. The injuries. Right. And I'll be the voice of the fan in a way here. I saw this a lot on social media, and there's a part of me that's covered this team for over a decade. And I know it's not necessarily ignorant, but it's definitely the fan opinion. I'll acknowledge that. So as a pseudo media member over my time covering this team, I know that it's not entirely on them, but the fan in me continues to ask what in the world the medical service team is doing. Because it seems like that the training staff, this team has had health issues for years. And some of it is joints, some of it is bone. You can't really help that. Those are things that just happen. But when it's a soft tissue thing, or it's something that might have to do with mobility, again, I struggle with the roster still not being 100%. Going into the regular season, because you don't have Vince Williams Jr. He'll be back soon. You still don't have Vince Williams Jr. You don't have Gigi Jackson. At what point do you say that there's issues beyond what's happening with the players, and it's the medical staff? And I know what the answer is because I've been doing this a while, but it's still frustrating, and I wanted to kind of articulate that. We haven't seen this team at full strength. When are we going to see it?
Yeah, and I get it, especially, with the Jaren Jackson Jr. Thing. We were told very early in the process, it's nothing serious, low grade hamstring, and he misses the entire preseason. Now there's always two sides of the coin there, and the side, like I think that you're kind of referring to, is, not seeing Jaren Jackson Jr. in the preseason, playing alongside of Zach Edey and everything in between is, it's a little frustrating. But at the same time, there have also been some fans who've said, put these guys in bubble wrap. We don't want to see them in the preseason anymore. Some fans didn't want to see Ja and Marcus Smart suit up for that last game, but guess what? I watched them playing that last game, and I can definitely tell you it was very beneficial to them. But with all that being said, I think that's definitely the bad, and kind of you hinted onto it going into detail a little bit more. So I'm definitely gonna kind of use that as the basis of what I wanted to say, and it's the we didn't get to see Jaren Jackson Jr. in particular, and that just stands out to me because what I think we're starting to see is Zach Edey is slowly kind of figuring things out. And I asked him after the game, after the 5th preseason game, because Jaren Jackson Jr. has been I saw him doing some 4-on-4 work. Again, he's ramping up, so to speak. And I asked Zach, have you practiced much, with him? Because maybe behind closed doors, the two are working close together. No, they haven't practiced much together. So what you're basically about to see is there will be a couple practices here. And then Wednesday, it's like, all right, Jaren Edey. Jaren, we need you to go get 3-4 blocks, score 18 points. Zach Edey, go get a double-double. I mean, of course, that's not exactly what people will say, but the expectations will be there from both. And what the point that I'm making is it's going to be an adjustment. And I think Zach Edey is going to have to learn how to play alongside of him, and Jaren's going to have to learn how to play alongside of him. We saw Jaren dominate inside last season. And talking to Taylor Jenkins, I get the kind of idea that Jaren's going to be on the perimeter a little bit more. I don't really know how to feel about that. But, that comes with him moving back to the 4, playing outside of big like Zach Edey. But I just thought Jaren was so dominant in the paint, last season. Like he really finally figured out mastering the fact that I'm stronger than you dudes and you can't stop me. So with all that being said, the bad for the preseason me is definitely Jaren Jackson Jr. I said it all over the last week. I wanted to see that starting lineup at least one time. We didn't get to see it. So if they get off to a slow start, I'm definitely going to probably circle back to that.
Well, I think the biggest thing is because when I've talked about Edey being so paint dependent, shout out to our wonderful Purdue listeners who fill our comments with all sorts of kind things. When I talk about that and I bring up Jonas Valanciunas, Zach Edey has an offensive skill set that is similar to that, right? And I think that
he said that he, that's one of the guys he's watched. And I know some people saw your Valanciunas comment like, oh, Zach, he's better. Like, sure, you want him to be better, but like you said, Joe, he has said himself, if you ask Zach Edey which centers, Valanciunas is going to be one of the names that he says.
Because they have similar skill sets. And the thing about Edey, when it comes to him and doing things for guards, right? That's another thing that gets pointed out. Like he's going to do so much for Ja Morant. I don't disagree with that. Yeah. But Edey did not play with a big like Jaren Jackson Jr. at any point during his time at Purdue. How could you? Jaren Jackson Jr. is one of those unicorn types, like a Porzingis and Siakam, a big that can do a variety of different things. That is not what was Edey's experience. Those two guys not getting reps together, that's a massive concern, and one that if they do start slow, it would not be surprising if we saw a slow offensive start from Jaren because he's not in a position to be as aggressive at the basket. Now, we haven't seen, in fairness to Taylor Jenkins, what his rotation is going to be because we haven't seen these guys play together. So maybe he has it all planned out that Edey and Jaren will play together at the start of the end of games and they'll get opportunities to shine without one another on the floor throughout the rotation. That's certainly possible. But in the absence of seeing it, we have to speculate. And I have concerns, just like you do, about how that's going to fit in terms of maximizing what both of them do well.
For sure. And to pivot here a little bit, I think we got to mention the turnovers too. We'll be remiss if we didn't mention the turnovers. That is definitely the bad of the preseason. I think they had, of the 5 games, I could be wrong, but it's at least 3 of the 5. I think 4 of the 5 games they had over 20 turnovers. There was one win. I think they had 16 turnovers, but 20 or more turnovers in 4 of the 5 games. And it wasn't just like one guy was heavily turning the ball over. It was like, oh, if he fixes that, well, it was pretty much distributed. Zach Edey had his share. Scottie Pippen Jr., we talked about him at one point leading the preseason in turnovers. He had his share for sure, and a bunch of other guys. So this up-tempo style is definitely giving them some easy scoring opportunities. But it seems like at least right now, before they kind of really get into, mid-season form with this thing, there's a give and take there. And you're giving away some turnovers while you're taking some easy scoring opportunities.
Definitely looking for more comfort on the offensive end. That's something that I'm sure we'll focus on this week and beyond as the season gets started. Is it an injury concern not seeing Jaren Jackson Jr. next to Zach Edey? Is it turnovers? Let Damichael and I know in the comments or on X how you're feeling when it comes to the bad of the preseason. Of course, it's not all bad. We'll get positive next here on Locked On Grizzlies to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, the season is in full swing. You can get a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Maybe you're somebody like me and you were watching the Washington Commanders this past Sunday and you were thinking, oh no, Jaden Daniels is out. That's the whole reason the Commanders are good, right? Wrong answer. Maybe you believe, baby. You believe that the Commanders are one of the best teams in the NFC and perhaps the entire NFL, and you stuck with the Commanders mid-game, even after their star quarterback went down. You could see how the Commanders were playing without him with the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets over at FanDuel. And you can get started today with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You heard me right, $200 bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can do all of that over at FanDuel.com. Again, go and check out FanDuel.com today. Damichael, we'll get out of here on some positivity. Again, we were talking about turnovers and a lack of Jaren, the injury issues already in the preseason. Mm-hmm. What's your main positive for this preseason coming out of it, going into the season at large, 2 days away from opening night for the Grizzlies in particular? What has you feeling all sunshine and rainbows as we get ready to get this grind going?
This could be a huge year for Ja Morant. And when I say huge, everything that we've heard, the pace, the movement, all of that makes the game easier for Ja. It's going to make his numbers better. It should make his team better. It should make his team better overall. The Grizzlies, I got to look this up, Joe. Or if one of the listeners, you can look this up too, or Joe, you look it up as well. I think there's a real chance that this starting lineup could have 3 guys average over 5 assists. I wonder how common that thing is. If you have Marcus Smart, Ja Morant, and Desmond Bane each average at least 5 assists. Now, circling back to the Ja Morant part of this, because I was talking to Marcus, talking to Ja after that last game, and Ja basically just didn't sound like he was used to. We talked about, the alley-oop that Marcus Smart threw to him, and Marcus Smart was pointing out another point in the game where he had Ja, and he had to tell Ja, like, hey, I see you. Like, I'm going to pass you the ball. And Ja was talking about that sequence too, kind of like, I got to get used to that a little bit. So we're so used to Ja being on the ball and the defense kind of being, all eyes on Ja, right? A lot of the eyes on Ja, and kind of him scoring acrobatically, spinning through 3-4 guys to get baskets, more so in the playoffs, but in the regular season too, against the really good defenses. This should free him up as a scorer. This should free him up, as a playmaker. I mean, we saw a couple easy assists to Zach Edey, Desmond Bane's going to be cutting all over the floor. I think Ja Morant, if there were any doubts whatsoever, Joe, all NBA, it's all NBA year for him.
I think so too, and I think it could be all NBA second team. I think he could be a top 10 guy in the league. He's going to put up numbers in this system. I absolutely believe that, and that's a credit to the coaches, right? We've been hard on Jenkins in the past. It's a credit to them that they're looking and saying, well, what does our best guy do well? He gets out in space, he runs, he presses offensively. he makes the defense be back on their heels. It feels like they're running a scheme that's going to accentuate what Ja does really well. And I'm excited to watch that play out. You mentioned the guy that I'm excited about. I'm with you with Ja. But Desmond Bane, I just feel like it's so loaded in the Western Conference. I don't know if it's going to result in an all-star season for him. But you mentioned the 5 assists. It looks like he's got his shooting stroke going.
I think he'll average that.
He's just such a professional guy, right? Like he just really looks like a 25-5 season is incoming, and maybe even better in terms of scoring with all of these new possessions if they're able to protect them a little bit better on the turnover end. He just really shines to me in the fact that it feels like he's found his place, right? Like he at TCU, maybe he thought he was a little too good for TCU. They were the only Division I school that offered him. We heard the stories of places like Detroit saying, yeah, Des, we'll draft you if you're there. Dallas passing on him when literally he played at TCU right down the street. Memphis clearly values him. I think that he's really kind of found his footing in Memphis with the Grizzlies. I think Ja is going to outshine him for obvious reasons. But I think Bane, even more so than Jaren, right? Like I feel like this missed preseason. I think in the past I've talked about Jaren being that second best guy, that all NBA guy.
Right.
Maybe be on the fringe. Maybe it's going to be Bane now. He just seems to be kind of locked in at this stage, which is a really exciting thing.
Where do they rank, Joe?
Lethal.
Where do they rank? They're top 2 to me. That backcourt.
I mean, it's them. I'm guessing you'd put Luka and Kyrie in front.
Got to, just the respect factor there. But who else?
I would say they're top. I wouldn't take. I mean, I'm not as high on Kyrie as you are. Like Luka Doncic, I'm very high on, obviously.
Yeah. You got Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. It's a really good one.
I think I would take the combination of Bane and Ja over those two. I think you're right. I think it's Doncic and Kyrie, and then it's Ja and Bane. And I don't know that, we're going to sound like homers for saying that, partner. Like if there's national.
Look around the league.
I'm with you. I think that they're going to prove it this year.
I'm going to say Shea Gilgeous and Alex Caruso. I mean, ESPN didn't have
Caruso
in front of them.
Apparently ESPN will say Alex Caruso will be up there in terms of strength of roster. Any other positives that you take away? Obviously, the backcourt's going to look pretty good. Is there anybody else that stood out to you or anything else to leave our audience with some happy feelings going into the rest of their week?
I think the backcourt part of it definitely stands out to me. And other positives. I mean, Joe, I guess,
don't you dare say who I think you're going to say.
No, I'm fine. I'm going to do it.
I knew you were going to.
I'm not going to say what you think.
Okay.
But you're in the window, but you're not in the right window. Okay. Jalen Wells, the rookie, led all rookies in the preseason in scoring. We got to give the rook some love. I know people probably going to get on us if we mention Jalen Wells. His confidence, I've talked about it a lot, but you just don't see a lot of rookies. Like we've seen rookies come through here in Memphis who were supposed to be shooters or whatever the case may be, and it's like maybe they'll get there, find their way around. This dude's coming in the game. I mean, Joe, did you see early in that third quarter who he was on the floor with? It was Ja Morant. It was Desmond Bane. It was Zach Edey. It was Santi Aldama. And Jalen Wells was sandwiched in between them. He wasn't hesitating. I'm talking about not even just catch and shoot. He went off the dribble at one point. I'm like, even forget how the play worked out. It's the fact that he has the confidence to say, I don't just have to go over here and stand in the corner when Ja and Dez are on the floor. Like I got a bag too. Look, he looks the part. I'm not saying he's some future, all-star, anything like that at this point. But from a complimentary standpoint, I've said that's what the Grizzlies need in these guys. That's what makes Vince Williams so good to me. They need guys who you can put alongside of Ja, Dez, and Jaren, and they'll fit perfectly. He's one of those guys based off what we've seen. He can be that type of player.
I think so too. I was afraid you're going to say positive things about John Contra.
I knew. That's why I said you were in the window, same position, same.
I'm very glad.
Yeah.
I'm very glad you didn't do that to me. I think that the biggest thing for us is being in a position where it's comfortable enough for him to have opportunity, right? Because I don't think he's going to have opportunity to start. He's just not. But having
that means John Conchar is
goes on.
That means John Conchar is. That's what you're
Again,
admitting.
I'm doing what you do and thinking like
The
Taylor
Taylor
Jenkins.
Jenkins.
It should be Jalen Wells, but it's probably going to be Conchar. And
Mhm.
in that situation, continuing to take advantage of those opportunities that you just mentioned, when he was out there with those starting level players,
Yeah.
the biggest piece and part of this is going to be building upon that confidence and maintaining momentum and moving forward, not going backwards with his play. That's going to be huge for him this season. It's a big formative year for him, obviously, as a rookie. Let Damichael and I know how you're feeling, positives, negatives in the comments. Hit us up on X. We're always excited to have a conversation with you guys beyond the show itself. Make sure you're hitting us up and let us know how you're feeling. A big week here on Locked On Grizzlies. I mentioned the Locked On newsletter. Again, give us a little bit of patience these first few days as we get the kinks out. It's a busy time of year for both Damichael and myself. But go to LockedOnDaily.com. Again, LockedOnDaily.com. Subscribe to our newsletter. It'll be out there this week, and it's going to be a lot of good stuff each and every day. And, of course, Damichael, you're back on the road for the commercial appeal. You'll be there in Utah for opening night, and then you're heading to Houston later on in the week. Lots of fun things we can talk about. Practice, of course, injury updates. The season's upon us.
Yes, season is upon us. And these two games, we'll dig deeper into them. But just off the top of my head, these two games stand out. One, because if you remember, I mean, Joe, I know you remember because you talked about it a lot on that show when Laurie Markkinen, kind of just I mean, he was hitting whatever shot he wanted to early. I think that was early last season, against the Grizzlies. And then that second game, I can't wait. You like narratives, Joe? I like narratives too. And
I'm a huge fan of narratives.
I can't wait to see Dillon Brooks guard John Morant. I can't wait. I just know it's we'll talk about it later in the week.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of barking in that game.
I
There's
can't
going to
wait.
be two guys who got that dog in them going after one another. It's going to be pretty sweet. That's going to be a fun one. That's going to be a fun Friday night main event there in Houston, Texas. Lots of fun things to talk about this week. We're excited. Hopefully you are too as the season gets rolling. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. Proud members of Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Again, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon. Check us out at all those places. Check out Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd giving great tips. Maybe your draft is happening this week before opening night. You want to avoid injuries and all those sorts of things. Make sure you're hitting up Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Make that your second listen, your second watch. Make sure you're with us tomorrow for a brand new episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Until then, he's Damichael, I'm Joe. Stay locked in. Have a great rest of your Monday. Have a great start to your week, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday on Locked On Grizzlies. Have a good one.